Hey everyone, welcome to my morel video. I'm just going to go through my process a bit here and kind of explain to you how I go about carving my mushrooms. So with every mushroom, I start on my belt disc sander. So I've cut a few blocks of basswood here, and now I'm shaping, kind of just trying to get a general overall idea of what the cap's going to look like. This helps me when I'm coming to this point here when I'm carving. My burr bits obviously carve really well. I can get nice deep gouges, but at the same time I still kind of need to have a general shape. It just saves time and hassle. You can see here what I'm doing is just taking down the underside of the cap a little bit so the stem fits in there nicely. It just adds a little bit of depth to the mushroom and a little bit more realism. Then I'll go to the outside of the cap and just kind of smooth out all those hard edges from the disc sander. And as you can see, I'm using my coarse saber-tooth burr bit here. I've got a range of sizes and coarseness, fine, and then on top of that, different shapes. What I've gone on to now is I'm actually taking a little carving bit and just kind of hollowing out the little sections. I don't even know what they call them on the morels. So this just kind of gives me a general shape of all these little sections, like they're almost like little cells. That's kind of how I picture them and how they interlock together. So this way, when I go onto this step here with the burr bit, I've already got kind of an outline done, and I can just kind of exaggerate those depressions a little bit more. And as you can see, I'm using a pointed tip, fine burr bit here, and that's allowing me to get in deep, but also I can, with that shaped bit, I can get really kind of pointy shapes, but I can also get wider shapes. Next, what I'm doing here is I'm using the torch. So if you're seeing a lot of my work, you know I'm a big fan of the torch. I use it for a couple reasons. One, obviously the color, so it does blacken the wood really nice and gives you can get a lot of dark browns and blacks. It's not just straight black and white. On top of that, it's kind of like free sanding. When you burn or char the wood, it becomes kind of smooth, and when you go over it with like a 400 grit, all of a sudden it's perfectly smooth. So that's a huge help in the sanding process. What I'm going through now is I've put the caps, after they've all been carved, I put them onto a little steel rod just so I make it a little bit easier to paint them. I'm using food coloring. So what I'll do is mix food coloring with a little bit of alcohol so that it penetrates the wood a bit better. I believe here I was using kind of like orange and yellow and brown kind of all mixed together. The problem with food coloring is it's super bright. So to get those natural tones, you kind of have to play with the color a little bit and add some brown or something. What I'm doing here is I'm burning off the alcohol, giving a little bit of char, but mostly just burning that little bit of alcohol off. I find that helps with the color as well. That'll kind of darken the tone of the food coloring, so it's not so bright, like cake icing, like it's meant for. And then I go through and I just kind of sanding all those little edges that stick up just to kind of smooth them out so there's no hard edges on them. Then I go through and, as you've seen, I seal it with a sandable sealer made by Minwax. Then I just gave them a quick spray to seal them again with polyurethane satin clear coat. What I'm doing now is I'm going through and shaping my stems. So again, I use the belt disc sander or combination to shape my stems, and then also I use that to do my backing. So all my wall mounts, I use different types of slab wood or wood that I have around, firewood. And as you can see, I kind of slice them really thin like a piece of slab wood, and then I sand them on all sides. Now I've gone on to the process of sanding my stems, which it's hard to put into even a 10-minute video like you have here. I mean, I spend hours and hours and hours sanding. That's probably the most important part, but it's also the most boring, so I don't show a lot of it. Again, here I'm using the torch. What I'm doing is I'm blackening the back sides of each piece that I'm making, the reason I do that is so I can carve in my signature like you see here. And it just kind of makes the signature pop a little bit more. And I really enjoy the torch, how the torch highlights not only the grain of the wood, but it highlights even the little scratches and the chainsaw marks and things like that, which I find it gives a lot of character to the wood. I don't want everything to be perfectly smooth, and because it kind of takes away from the realness. And then I'll add my hardware onto each piece. So I pre-drill a little hole, and then I have these little hangers and screws, so I get them all together, and I find that just the cheap ones work fine. None of my pieces weigh a lot, so the little tiny hangers are perfect. Now again, with the Minwax sandable sealer, I'm dipping all the wood. This is great because bark absorbs polyurethane like crazy. It's just like a sponge, so it would take like 4 or 5 coats to accomplish the same thing with a single coat of this sandable sealer. Now I'm drilling holes into each stem. The reason I do that is so I can attach everything with pins. This just adds a ton of stability. If you just straight glued them, they would be really fragile. And with me shipping a lot of my pieces around North America, I want them to be very sturdy. Now, obviously, they still are made of wood, so there's some, fragility to them. But overall, these little 1/8" steel rods really help a lot with the stability of the piece. And on top of that, as you can see, it gives me kind of something to hold on to as I'm spraying and coating them and letting them dry, so that they, I don't get fingerprint marks on them, etc. So again, I just use a really basic polyurethane to coat them. I find that's all you need. I do have some really expensive clear coats, but they're so thick. You use a paint gun with them. They're not spray bomb, but they're just so thick. It adds like a really thick layer of gloss to it, which is great for some pieces, but not everything I want to be like high gloss. So for this piece and for others, sometimes I'll use satin or semi-gloss. And as you can see here, I'm pre-drilling my holes and pegging the mushrooms. So in this, I'm doing 2 different styles. I'm doing a standalone piece along with the wall mounts. I try to do multiple pieces at once. The reason being is to go through this whole process for like just a couple mushrooms. Doesn't take that much longer to do twice or 3 times as many. And it allows me to do like multiple types of pieces at once. So this is my decorating. The process I'm going through right now is pretty similar on every piece. I'll add my moss, go through, trim it up, and try to get it placed so it's kind of natural looking. And then I'll go through my lichens, and I'll adhere all the lichens that I've collected. So all this stuff is things I've collected off the forest floor, and I let them dry and seal them up, and then once I attach them and clear coat them, they become almost hard like rock. So the lichen and the moss are like sponges. So as soon as you spray them with polyurethane, they absorb into the cells. So that way you add a ton of structure. So these little soft bits, actually, when it's all done and coated, will be like actually hard to the touch. So here I'm adding my reindeer moss. So I have 3 different color reindeer moss. I like to kind of use those to accent the colors instead of just, I find that, in nature, when you look at the forest floor, it's not one solid color of green. There's multiple shades of green that kind of are just randomly placed, and I try to accomplish that between the lichens and the moss. And I find that the 3 different colors of reindeer moss really add to it. So as you can see here, this is my finished piece. The orange really pops through, and as you can see, the way I've treated it, it's really come out natural looking. So anyway, thanks everybody for listening in. I'll make some more of these videos coming up soon.